If you have ever been the scapegoat in a family that values image over truth, you know that the truth doesn't set you free. Not at first. At first, the truth is just a quiet casualty, buried under the weight of someone else's convenient lie. My name is Beverly, and for 30 years I was the villain in the Whitmore family history books. But the thing about history is that it can be rewritten in a single afternoon, provided you have the right evidence and the patience to wait for the ink to dry. I was 45 years old when I finally saw my father, Theodore Whitmore, lose his composure. I don't mean he raised his voice. Theodore didn't yell. He was a man of oak-paneled boardrooms and hushed country clubs. But on that Tuesday afternoon in late August, standing in the manicured gardens of our family estate in Connecticut, his hands shook so violently that the champagne in his crystal flute sloshed over the rim, soaking his custom-tailored cuff. He looked at me, then at my sister Victoria, and I saw 3 decades of certainty crumble behind his eyes. It was the moment I had waited for since I was 15, but looking at him then, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a cold, clinical precision. The audit was complete. The ledger was balanced. To understand why his hands were shaking, you have to go back to 1994. I was 15, awkward, bookish, and cursed with an observant nature that my parents found unsettling. Victoria was 17, golden-haired, charismatic, and the undisputed star of the Whitmore show. She was the one destined for the Ivy League. I was the difficult one, the spare heir who asked too many questions at dinner. It happened on a humid July evening. My parents were away at a gala in Newport. The crown jewel of my father's collection, a 1961 Jaguar E-Type, was sitting in the garage, strictly off-limits. I was in my room reading safe and sound. Victoria, however, was not. She had snuck out to meet a boy, a townie named Rick, with a leather jacket and a bad reputation, and she had taken the Jaguar to impress him. I woke up to the sound of metal crunching against stone. It was 2 a.m. I ran outside in my pajamas to find the Jaguar wrapped around the stone pillar of the estate's front gate. The front end was an accordion of British racing green. Steam hissed into the night air. Victoria was stumbling out of the driver's side, sobbing, smelling of peach schnapps and fear. She wasn't alone, but Rick was already running down the driveway, disappearing into the dark. "Beverly!" she screamed when she saw me. "You have to help me! Dad will kill me!" I did what any loyal little sister would do. I ran to her. I checked if she was hurt. But before I could even ask what happened, the headlights of my parents' Mercedes swept up the drive. They had come home early. The scene was a disaster. Police lights followed shortly after. When Theodore stepped out of the car, his face was a mask of terrifying calm. He looked at the ruined Jaguar, then at us. "Who was driving?" he asked. His voice was barely a whisper. I opened my mouth to speak, but Victoria beat me to it. She pointed a trembling finger directly at me. "It was Beverly," she sobbed, collapsing into our mother's arms. "I tried to stop her, Daddy. She was angry. She said she wanted to ruin something you loved. She stole the keys. I ran out to try and pull her out of the car, but she just hit the gas." I stood there frozen. The lie was so audacious, so completely backward that my brain couldn't process it. "No," I stammered. "No, that's not true. I was in bed." Victoria took it. "Stop lying, Beverly." My mother. Constance clutched Victoria tighter, stroking her hair. "Look at your sister, she's traumatized. We've known you were jealous, but this is pathological." "Check her room," I screamed. "Check the alcohol on her breath." "That's enough," Theodore roared. It was the only time I ever heard him yell. "Go to your room. The police will handle the report, but I will handle you." The next morning it got worse. My mother's emerald necklace, a family heirloom insured for $50,000, was missing from her vanity. Victoria told them she saw me holding it earlier. They searched my room. They found the necklace wrapped in one of my sweaters tucked under my mattress. I hadn't put it there. I had never touched it. That was the end of my life as a Whitmore. My parents sat me down in the library. They didn't ask for my side of the story. They told me that I was clearly unwell, a pathological liar with destructive tendencies. To protect the family reputation and to help me, I was being sent to a strict therapeutic boarding school in Utah. "We love you, Beverly," my father said, signing the papers that would exile me. "But we cannot trust you." I left 2 days later. As the town car drove me away, I looked back at the house. Victoria was watching from her bedroom window. She didn't wave. She just watched her face blank, her victory absolute. I didn't cry. That was the day I stopped crying and started remembering. I vowed that one day I would return and I wouldn't come back as a daughter. I would come back as a witness. The years that followed were a study in contrast. While Victoria was collecting diplomas from Vassar and spending her summers in the Hamptons, I was in the high desert of Utah stripping logs for cabin construction and sitting in group therapy sessions where I was forced to admit to crimes I hadn't committed. If I denied them, I was labeled resistant. So I learned to be quiet. I learned to observe. I learned that the loudest person in the room is usually the one with the most to hide. When I turned 18, I was released, but the exile wasn't over. My parents offered to pay for college provided I attended a small religious institution of their choosing and came home only for major holidays, and even then, I was to stay in the guest cottage, not the main house. I declined. "I'll make my own way," I told Theodore over the phone. "Don't be foolish, Beverly," he scoffed. "You have no skills, no connections. You'll be back in 6 months begging for help." "Watch me," I said, and hung up. I moved to Chicago. I waited tables, worked double shifts, and put myself through the University of Illinois. I discovered I had a knack for numbers. Numbers didn't lie. Numbers didn't gaslight you. If a column didn't balance, there was a reason, a trail, a mistake that could be found and fixed. I majored in accounting, then specialized in forensic accounting. By the time I was 30, I was working for a top firm hunting down embezzlement and fraud for Fortune 500 companies. I became known as the Bloodhound. I could look at a stack of invoices and tell you exactly where the CFO was siphoning money to pay for his mistress's condo in Boca Raton. My estrangement from my family became my armor. I had no safety net, which meant I couldn't afford to fail. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on the Whitmores. It wasn't hard. They were always in the society pages. Victoria Whitmore hosts charity gala. Theodore Whitmore acquires new commercial high-rise. They looked perfect, but looking at photos of Victoria, I saw what others missed. I saw the tightness around her eyes in her late 20s. I saw the forced smiles. I saw the rotation of friends that never seemed to last more than a year or two. I didn't go home for Christmas. I didn't go home for birthdays. I sent polite cards. They sent checks which I voided and returned. It drove Constance mad. She wanted me to cash them so she could feel like a good mother. Returning them was a silent rejection she couldn't spin to her friends. I built a life of quiet dignity. I bought a brownstone in a good neighborhood. I had a small circle of friends who knew my story and believed me. I was happy. Or so I told myself. But there was always that loose thread, that injustice from 1994, that sat in the back of my mind like an unsolved case file. Then 3 weeks ago, the invitation arrived. It was heavy cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. "Theodore and Constance Whitmore request the pleasure of your company at the Whitmore Legacy Luncheon, celebrating 50 years of excellence. A special announcement regarding the future leadership of the Whitmore Foundation will be made." It was a summons. My father was retiring from the foundation, the charitable arm of the family empire, and he was going to hand the keys to the kingdom over to Victoria. My first instinct was to throw it in the recycling bin. Why go? Why subject myself to their judgment, their pity, their rewriting of reality? Victoria was now 47, presumably settled and successful. I was 45. We were strangers. But the next day, a second package arrived. This one was wrapped in brown paper postmarked from a nursing home in Greenwich. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably imperious. It was from my great-aunt Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn was my father's aunt, the matriarch of the family, a woman who terrified everyone, including Theodore. She had never liked Constance, and she had always looked at Victoria with a skeptical eye. Inside the package was a simple note and a USB drive. The note read, "My dear Beverly, I am old and I am tired of secrets. I found this in the safe of the old pool house before they renovated it. Your father never saw it. I think it belongs to you. If you are going to that dreadful luncheon, bring this. It is time the ledger was balanced." Aunt Gwen. I plugged the drive into my laptop. What I saw made my breath catch in my throat. It was grainy black and white footage, timed and dated. July 14th, 1994. 1:55 a.m. I watched the screen for an hour. Then I closed my laptop, picked up my phone, and RSVP'd to the luncheon. I wasn't just going to attend. I was going to testify. The drive to Connecticut took 3 hours. It was a Tuesday in late August, the kind of day where the sky is a piercing, impossible blue. I drove my own car, a sensible, immaculate Audi sedan. I didn't rent a flashy sports car to prove a point. I didn't need to perform success. I was success. As I turned onto the long gravel driveway lined with ancient oaks, a familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. The body remembers trauma even when the mind has processed it. I gripped the steering wheel, reminding myself that I wasn't 15 anymore. I wasn't the scared girl in pajamas. I was a senior partner at Miller and Finch. I had sent men to federal prison for less than what my sister had done to me. The estate, High Hollows, loomed ahead. It was a massive Georgian brick structure, imposing and cold. From a distance it looked majestic. But as I pulled into the valet circle, my auditor's eye kicked in. I noticed the creeping ivy that was actually damaging the mortar on the west wing. I saw that the slate roof had several mismatched tiles, a sign of cheap repairs. The Whitmore fortune, I suspected, wasn't quite as robust as the society pages suggested. I stepped out of the car. I was wearing a tailored navy sheath dress, simple pearls and heels that were high enough to be authoritative, but low enough to walk on grass. I looked like what I was, a professional. The valet, a young man who didn't know me, took my keys. "Welcome to High Hollows, ma'am." "Thank you," I said. I walked up the stone steps. The front door, the same door I had been dragged through by police officers 30 years ago, swung open. My mother, Constance, was standing in the foyer directing the catering staff. She looked remarkably preserved for 70, her hair a helmet of blonde lacquer, her face pulled tight by expensive surgeons. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw me. "Beverly," she said. No hug, no smile, just an appraisal. Her eyes raked over my dress, my shoes, my face. "You came. We weren't sure you would." "Hello, Mother," I said. My voice was steady. "It seemed like an important day." "It is," she said, smoothing her silk dress. "Victoria is finally taking her rightful place. It's going to be a wonderful celebration. I do hope—" She lowered her voice, leaning in slightly. "I do hope you haven't come to cause a scene. We've told everyone you've been doing better, that you're working in bookkeeping in the Midwest." I almost laughed. "Forensic accounting in Chicago, Mother, and I'm a partner." She waved her hand dismissively. "Details. The point is, today is about Victoria. Just try to blend in. Table 14 is in the back near the hydrangeas. It's shady there." "I'll be fine," I said. "Is Aunt Gwendolyn here?" Constance rolled her eyes. "Unfortunately, the old bat insisted on coming. She's in the library. Try not to upset her. She's fragile." I nodded and walked past her. The house smelled the same lemon polish and old money, but the air felt heavy, stagnant. I walked toward the library, my heels clicking on the marble. I wasn't going to table 14. Not yet. The library was dim, the curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. Sitting in a high-backed leather wing chair was Gwendolyn Whitmore. She was 92, shrunken inside a tweed suit that looked 3 sizes too big, but her eyes were sharp as flint. She gripped a cane with a silver eagle's head handle. "So," she croaked as I entered, "the exile returns." I walked over and knelt beside her chair. "Hello, Aunt Gwen." She looked at me, really looked at me in a way my parents never had. She reached out a claw-like hand and touched my cheek. "You look like your grandmother. Strong jaw. Good." "Thank you for the package," I whispered. "Did you watch it?" I did. "And it changes everything." Gwendolyn chuckled a dry, rattling sound. "It doesn't change the past, my dear. You still lost 30 years. But it might save the future. That foundation. Theodore is a fool. He thinks Victoria is a business genius because she knows how to spend money. He doesn't see the rot. He never did." "Where did you find it?" "The old gardener, Mr. Henderson. He passed away last month. His son brought me a box of his things. Henderson was a paranoid man. He installed his own cameras in the garage and the gatehouse because he was convinced the staff was stealing his tools. He recorded everything. He never showed Theodore because he was afraid of Victoria. She threatened him, you know." My blood ran cold. "She threatened a 60-year-old man when she was 17. She's a viper, Beverly. Always was. But your parents, they wanted a show pony, not a daughter. They got one." She tapped her cane on the floor. "Are you brave enough to do it? It will ruin the party. The shrimp cocktails will go to waste." I smiled a tight, sharp smile. "I don't like shrimp." "Good girl. Help me up. I want a front row seat." I helped her stand. She was frail, but her grip on my arm was iron. We walked out of the library together. As we moved toward the garden where the white tent was set up, I saw the guests arriving, the cream of Connecticut society. Senators, bankers, old friends of the family who remembered me as the troubled girl who vanished. I saw them whispering as I passed. "Is that Beverly I thought she was in an institution? She looks normal." I held my head high. I wasn't just normal. I was armed. The garden was beautiful, I had to admit. White roses, linen tablecloths, a jazz quartet, playing softly in the gazebo. Theodore was holding court near the bar, looking distinguished in a gray suit. He saw me and Aunt Gwen approaching. He stiffened, then forced a smile and walked over. "Beverly," he said, nodding. "Aunt Gwen, I see you found each other." "Hello, Father," I said. He looked at me with a mixture of wariness and disapproval. "You look well. Constance tells me you're still in Chicago." "Yes, it's home." "Well," he cleared his throat. "Try to enjoy yourself. Victoria is very excited about today. It would mean a lot to her if you were supportive." "I'm very interested in hearing her speech," I said. "Good, good." He looked relieved that I wasn't making a scene yet. "She's in the sunroom getting ready." "I'll go say hello," I lied. I left Aunt Gwen settled at a table near the front, not the back, and made my way to the sunroom. The glass doors were open. Victoria was inside, checking her reflection in a full-length mirror. She hadn't aged well. From a distance, she was glamorous. Up close, the stress lines were visible through the heavy makeup. She was drinking a martini at 11:30 in the morning. "Hello, Victoria," I said from the doorway. She spun around, nearly spilling her drink. "Beverly, Jesus, you startled me." "You used to have better nerves," I said, stepping into the room. She laughed, a brittle, tinkling sound. "And you used to have worse clothes, Zara." "Armani," I corrected. "You look expensive." "I am," she smirked. "I'm the CEO designate Beverly. The foundation controls $300 million in assets. Daddy is finally letting go." "Does he know?" I asked quietly. "Know what? About the money you lost in the Cayman deal last year, or the lawsuit pending against your boutique for non-payment of vendors?" Victoria's face went white. How do you know that?" "I'm a forensic accountant, Victoria. Public records are my playground. And people talk. You're drowning, aren't you? You need the foundation salary. and the access to the endowment to cover your holes before Daddy finds out. She took a step toward me, her eyes narrowing. The mask slipped and I saw the 17-year-old bully again. Listen to me, you little freak. You say one word to him and I will ruin you again. I did it when we were kids and I can do it now. Who is he going to believe, the successful daughter who stayed, or the mental case who abandoned her family? I didn't abandon the family, I said calmly. I was evicted. Same thing. She downed the rest of her martini. Get out of my face. Go sit at the loser's table and eat your free lunch. This is my day. Enjoy it, I said. It's certainly going to be memorable. I turned and walked away. My hands weren't shaking, my heart wasn't racing. I felt a strange sense of calm. She hadn't changed. There was no remorse, no growth. She was just an older version of the girl who crashed a Jaguar and pointed a finger at me. That realization killed the last tiny lingering hope I had that maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't have to use the evidence. But she had made the choice for me. Lunch was served. Lobster bisque filet mignon. I barely touched it. I watched the room. I watched Theodore and Constance beaming at their guests, accepting congratulations. I watched Victoria working the room, charming the senator, laughing with the bank president. She was good at it. She had a way of making people feel like they were the only person in the room. It was a predator's gift. Aunt Gwen sat beside me. She ate her soup with gusto. Don't look so grim, child, she whispered. The anticipation is the best part. I'm not grim, I said. I'm focused. At 1 p.m., the jazz band stopped playing. Theodore walked up to the podium set up on the lawn. The feedback from the microphones squealed for a second before settling. Ladies and gentlemen, Theodore began, his voice booming with patriarchal pride. Family, friends, thank you for joining us on this momentous occasion. Applause rippled through the tent. 50 years ago, my father started the Whitmore Foundation with a simple mission to do good. For half a century, we have supported the arts, education, and healthcare in this state. But an organization is only as strong as its leadership. And today, I am stepping down. More applause, polite murmurs of, no, surely not. It is time for the next generation to take the helm, Theodore continued. And I can think of no one more qualified, more dedicated, and more morally sound than my daughter Victoria. He gestured to her. She stood up, feigning humility, hand over her heart. Victoria has been my right hand for the last 10 years, Theodore said. She has integrity. She has vision. Unlike some. He paused, and his eyes flickered briefly, almost involuntarily, toward me. Unlike some young people who lose their way, Victoria has always been a rock. She is the moral compass of this family. That was the phrase that did it. Moral compass. And so, Theodore raised his glass. I am proud to announce her appointment as CEO, effective immediately. The crowd cheered. Victoria walked toward the stage to accept the mantle. I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't run. I just walked purposefully toward the tech booth at the side of the stage, where a young man was managing the projector screen that displayed the foundation's logo. Aunt Gwen thumped her cane on the grass. Go get 'em, I heard her murmur. I reached the AV table just as Victoria reached the podium. She hugged Theodore. The photographers were snapping away. Excuse me, I said to the tech guy. He was a college kid, probably an intern. Can I help you? He whispered. I have the tribute video, I said smoothly. Theodore asked me to play it before her speech. It's a surprise. He looked confused. I didn't have that on the run sheet. That's why it's a surprise. I smiled. It was my best boardroom smile, confident, commanding. Here. I handed him the USB drive. File name The Truth. Just hit play and patch the audio. He hesitated. I leaned in. Do you really want to be the one who ruins Mr. Whitmore's surprise for his daughter? He shrugged and took the drive. Okay, sure. On stage, Victoria was adjusting the microphone. Wow, she breathed. I am overwhelmed. Thank you, Daddy, for trusting me. Just a moment, I said. My voice wasn't amplified, but it projected clearly in the silence of the garden. Victoria froze. Theodore squinted at me. Beverly, what are you doing? Sit down. I have a toast, I said, stepping out from behind the AV table. Or rather, a contribution to the family history you're so fond of talking about. Security, Victoria hissed into the mic, her eyes wide with panic. Go ahead. I nodded to the tech kid. He hit play. The massive LED screen behind Theodore and Victoria flickered. The Whitmore Foundation logo disappeared. In its place, grainy black and white footage appeared. The timestamp was visible in the corner, July 14, 1994, 01:55:00. The scene was the estate garage. The angle was high looking down. The lighting was poor, but the figures were unmistakable. A Jaguar E-Type sat in the driveway. A girl with long blonde hair, Victoria, was leaning against the driver's door. She was holding a bottle of peach schnapps. A boy in a leather jacket was kissing her neck. The audio, surprisingly crisp, crackled over the high-end speakers meant for jazz. Babe, are you sure you can drive? The boy asked. Shut up, Rick, Victoria's voice, young, arrogant, slurring slightly. I drive better when I'm buzzed. Besides, if anything happens, I'll just blame it on my weird sister. Dad believes anything I say about her. She's his disappointment. I'm his angel. The crowd gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the tent. On screen, Victoria laughed a cruel, cackling sound. Watch this. I'm going to do a donut. She got into the car. Rick got in the passenger side. The car lurched forward, engines revving. It swerved wildly, clipping the stone planter before accelerating toward the gate. The video cut to a second angle, the gatehouse. The Jaguar smashed into the pillar. Steam exploded. Then the most damning part. Victoria stumbled out. She checked the damage. She didn't check on Rick. She turned to the boy. Run! She screamed. Get out of here! I'm going to wake Beverly. I'll tell them she stole the keys. Go! Then she reached into her pocket. The camera caught the glint of something green and sparkling, the emerald necklace. Here, she said, shoving it at Rick. Take this. Pawn it. Just keep your mouth shut. Rick grabbed the necklace and ran. Victoria then messed up her hair, ripped her sleeve intentionally, and started practicing her crying face in the reflection of the broken window. Daddy, help me, she whispered to the glass, testing the line. Beverly did it. Beverly is crazy. The screen went black. The silence in the garden was absolute. Not a fork clinked, not a bird sang. I looked at the stage. Victoria was gripping the podium so hard her knuckles were white. Her mouth was opening and closing like a fish on a dock. She looked stripped naked in her Armani suit. But my eyes were on Theodore. He was staring at the blank screen. His face was a color I had never seen on a human being, gray like wet ash. He turned slowly to look at Victoria. You... His voice cracked. The microphone picked it up. You gave the necklace to that boy, Victoria stammered. Daddy, it's a deep fake technology these days. Beverly must have... Stop, Theodore whispered. It's fake. Victoria screamed, her voice shrill and terrifying. She forged it. She's always been jealous of me. Tell them, Mother. Constance was sitting in the front row. She had collapsed back into her chair, a hand over her mouth. She was looking at me. For the first time in my life, she wasn't looking at me with disdain. She was looking at me with horror. Because she knew. Deep down, she had always known. It was just easier to believe the lie. Theodore looked at me. He stood on the stage, the patriarch, the king of his castle, and he began to shake. It started in his hands. The champagne glass he was still holding rattled against his wedding ring. He looked at the daughter he had exiled, the daughter he had sent to therapeutic camps, the daughter he had called a pathological liar. And then he looked at the daughter he was about to give his legacy to, the thief, the liar, the sociopath he had nurtured. The glass slipped from his fingers. It shattered on the stage floor. Theodore's knees buckled. He didn't fall, but he had to grab the podium to stay upright. He was shaking violently now, his whole body vibrating with the shock of a reality that had just inverted itself. "I trusted you," Theodore wheezed, looking at Victoria. "I sacrificed her. For you." "Dad, please." Victoria reached for him. He recoiled as if she were a snake. "Don't touch me." He turned to the crowd. He looked at the senators, the bankers, the friends. He saw their faces. He knew his reputation was dead. But worse, he knew his soul was stained. He looked at me across the lawn. "Beverly," he said. "It was a plea, a beg. I didn't move." I stood by the AV table, my hands clasped in front of me. I was the witness. The aftermath was chaotic. Aunt Gwen was the first to break the tension. She started clapping. Slow, sarcastic applause. "Bravo," she cackled. "Best luncheon in years." That broke the spell. Guests started standing up, murmuring, gathering their purses. They wanted to get away from the blast zone. Victoria snapped. She lunged off the stage, coming toward me. "You bitch, you ruined everything." But she didn't get to me. Two security guards, the ones she had hired to keep out riffraff, stepped in her way. They had seen the video too. They knew who the threat was. "Ma'am, please step back," one said. Theodore was still shaking on stage. Constance had rushed to him, trying to steady him, but he wouldn't look at her either. He just kept staring at me. I walked over to Aunt Gwen. "Ready to go?" "More than ready," she said. We walked toward the valet stand. Behind us, I heard Theodore's voice. "Beverly, wait." I stopped. I turned around. Theodore had stumbled down the stairs. He was walking toward me, his gait unsteady. He looked 20 years older than he had 10 minutes ago. "Beverly," he said, stopping 5 feet away. Tears were streaming down his face. I didn't know. You have to believe me. I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," I corrected him gently. "There is a difference." "I can fix this," he said, his hands still trembling, reaching out but afraid to touch me. "We can. Victoria will be removed. The foundation, you can run it. It should be you. It should have always been you. Please, come inside. Let's talk." It was the offer I had dreamed of when I was 20. Validation, restoration, the crown. But looking at him now, a broken man shaking in his expensive suit, I realized I didn't want his kingdom. It was built on a foundation of rot. "I don't want the foundation, Theodore," I said. I didn't call him Dad. "I have a job. I have a life. I have a name that I built myself." "But you're my daughter," he sobbed. "Biologically," I said. "But you fired me from that position 30 years ago." "Constance." He turned to her as she caught up. Tell her we're sorry." Constance looked at me. "Beverly, please, don't leave us with her." She gestured toward Victoria, who was now screaming at a caterer. "You chose her," I said. "Now you get to keep her." I took the keys from the valet. I helped Aunt Gwen into the passenger seat of my Audi. "Where are we going?" Gwen asked as I buckled her in. "I'm taking you home," I said. "And then I'm going back to Chicago." "Good," she nodded. "I never liked this house anyway. Too many drafts." I walked around to the driver's side. Theodore was still standing in the driveway watching me. He was still shaking. He looked like a man who had woken up to find his house had burned down while he slept, only to realize he had been the one holding the matches. I got in the car and started the engine. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror as I drove down the gravel lane. I didn't need to see them shrinking in the distance. The drive back to the city was quiet. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the highway. For the first time in 30 years, the knot in my stomach was gone. I hadn't just proven my innocence. I had reclaimed my reality. I thought about mercy. People say forgiveness is divine, but sometimes letting people sit in the consequences of their actions is the holiest thing you can do. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. The shaking man in the driveway wasn't my father. He was just a client who had failed an audit, and I was just the accountant who finally balanced the books. As I crossed the state line, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of violet and gold. I rolled down the window and let the cool air rush in. It tasted like autumn. It tasted like truth. We often spend our lives waiting for an apology that will never come, or seeking validation from people who are committed to misunderstanding us. But looking at the empty road ahead, I realized that the only person who needed to believe in me was me. I had survived the lie. I had survived the truth. And now, finally, I could just live. If you have ever been the one they didn't believe, the one they cast aside, I want you to know this. Your truth does not require their signature to be valid. You are enough standing all on your own. What would you have done in my place? Would you have taken the foundation? Would you have forgiven him? Let me know in the comments below. My name is Beverly Whitmore, and this was my story.